Welcome to Conscious Profits Unfiltered. This is your host, Sebastian Nam.
What up, fam? I have a great guest in today's show, an expert in the social enterprise world by the name of Mark Horoszowski. You'll love this whether you're a founder of a small startup or hold any management position in a large-scale corporation. Mark is co-founder and CEO of movingworlds.org, a global platform that helps people volunteer their expertise with social impact organizations around the world, on their own or through corporate sponsored programs. Mark's company gets hired by major players such as SAP, eBay, Booking.com, Kellogg Foundation, Microsoft, which we actually get into in this episode, and many more. Since its launch in 2011, movingworlds.org has already helped unleash over $5 million worth of professional skills to social enterprises around the world and is the founder of the term experteering. Mark also co-chairs the American Cancer Society's National Volunteer Leadership Team and is a contributor at Huffington Post Impact. In this episode, we discuss impact investing, the importance of ROI, and how impact-driven movements can actually increase profits for companies with awesome real-life examples that Mark provides for us, and frankly, a bunch of other cool conscious business stuff. Enjoy the show. Mark, welcome to the show, my man. Thanks for being on.
Hey, thanks, Sebastian. Excited to be here.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Excited to have you. I always start out my shows by asking my guests, when was your last oh shit moment? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Just earlier today, had a teammate saying, "Hey, look, I'm waiting for results from a COVID test, and feeling super under the weather." So super bummed to hear that news.
Yeah.
And just about the health of team during a year that's already been so challenging for so many.
Totally, man. That's definitely that's an oh shit when you see that message. Though.
That's an oh shit.
Hoping for the best, man. Hoping for the best. What about your last hell yeah moment?
Last hell yeah moment. This weekend I was going on a trail run, and had this moment where I just stepped full out into a puddle, and I was like, hell yeah! Like it just brought me back into childhood. Like this is so fun, and be able to do this and still just find the joy in life and rainy days and puddles and whatever it might be. So
that's great, man. That's really cool. Most people would get really upset about it. Now they get their feet wet, and that was a hell yeah moment for you. That kind of shows the personality you have. So
hell yeah, and it's 2020, right? We'll take what we can get.
Take a puddle, man. That's awesome. So, Mark, your company, Moving Worlds, has been hired by major companies, names like SAP, Microsoft, eBay, the Kellogg Foundation. The list goes on. So before we get into why these companies are getting involved with purpose-driven movements, I wanted to ask you why you decided to get into the social enterprise areas, and was there a tipping point for you that caused you to go that route?
Yeah, great question, and it's a bit funny answering that question right now, during this recession, during these crises, because it was actually in the last crisis during the Great Recession where this whole journey started for me. Coming out of college, I had started in accounting, and had some early career successes that I largely attributed it to work that I was doing in my volunteer experience. So by the same time that I was joining and jumping into busy season at PricewaterhouseCoopers, I was also a volunteer with the American Cancer Society on their national leadership training team. So I was flying around actually the country, training communities and staff on how do you fundraise digitally, how do you mobilize communities, both staff and volunteers, and I'd had some early career successes, and I think a lot of that experience came from the fact that I had all this extra volunteer experience too. And when I joined the corporate sector, many companies were even talking about yeah, we care about society and we care about social good. We want you to volunteer, but the second that it conflicts with busy season, a seminal moment for me was I had to ask if I could use a weekend to go to an American Cancer Society event where I was a volunteer, and I couldn't because we were too busy. And I get business, right? I get the bottom line, but just knowing that I was now kind of in this place where profits reign supreme, and then you're coming out of the Great Recession, and you see income inequality widening, you see environmental deregulation and degradation as a result happening. And I was like, there has to be a different way than just pure profit-driven companies in order for, A, the economy to operate, but for B, in a place for me to work with. So yeah, I took off. I spent a year traveling and volunteering with a new type of entity, a social enterprise
Mhm.
that was using the power of market, right, business, but for the sake of some larger social and environmental cause.
That's great. And that actually that leads right into my next question of why should for-profit companies, there's listeners thinking, I have a for-profit company, why should I care about social enterprise? And beyond that, is it only applicable to entrepreneurs or founders of companies, or does it also apply to big multinational corporations?
Yeah, it's a great company. I mean, look, I also lecture on this stuff at the University of Washington. Literally, the topic is corporate social responsibility. And
Mm.
it doesn't matter what stage of entity you are at, like investing in your community, your employees, your ecosystem partners, the environment, right? All of these investments, right, not only help create an organization that is better for communities and employees and for the environment, but they also create a more stable organization, right? They recruit better talent. They have more stable supply chains, right? And you're seeing this, I think, exaggerated during the crisis, right? Where if
Mm.
you're a company right now that doesn't care about issues like racial equality and social justice, like it is hard to keep your high performing talent. In fact, they are leaving companies. Even during recession, people are leaving companies if their values don't align with that company. Um,
That's such an interesting point. That
right?
that the top talent really cares. I was recently actually just doing a little piece of content about the importance of taking a stand and how it's no longer like okay for companies to just be Switzerland and be vanilla or just be right in the middle. You don't need to do that anymore. So if your company actually resonates truthfully, authentically with a cause, then speak up about it. You know.
Yeah, yeah, it's hugely true, right? I think, you know, pre-COVID, you started to see the rise of what was called like the employee activist, right? Employees saying, you know, these are people within Amazon, within Google, right, within Facebook, who are saying, look, our company is actually doing some things that aren't in the best interest of society. And we
Mhm.
understand why we're doing it, right? It's profit driven. We
Yeah.
understand the power of the market. But if you want to keep me here, I care about these things too, right? And guess what? Our consumers care about these things too,
Mhm.
right? And you have to adapt to consumer demand.
And we'll close the circle a little later, but it's so interesting because it's not just about the consumers or the environment. It's so much has to do with the people inside the company. And that's what you were mentioning, people losing some of those top performers when if their companies don't actually care.
Yep, yep.
So super interesting. Mark, what is impact investing? Is it harder to get funding for impact driven companies? Is it easier? What is that whole world like? Enlighten us a little bit on this whole impact VC world.
Sure. So impact investing is certainly a lot of buzz right now around it, right? Like, what is it? How do I get into it? How do I access it? Here's the core premise of it, right? Which is saying, if I have money to invest, right? I know I can invest it into the stock market. We know what the stock market does, right? Quarterly returns, maximize value for shareholders. Impact investing says we're going to invest in companies that are measuring things that are more than just profits, right? This usually includes issues like environmental and other social good issues, right? So this is carbon, this is pay equity. In fact, there's five kind of main categories that you'll kind of see within like solid businesses, including governments and communities where you invest, the environment, your employees, and then how you make profits. So think of that like your supply chain, your distribution chain.
Mm.
So impact investors are saying, hey, I'm going to invest in companies that kind of measure their not only their profits but also their social and environmental impact across these categories. Now there's this kind of wide array, right? There are companies like in some funds, even Apple can be listed as like an ESG fund, environmental and social governance fund. And this is where you're looking at like huge, like BlackRock, Goldman Sachs style, major asset class investing in businesses like an Apple, like a Microsoft, who are making big bets on sustainability, right?
Mm.
All their servers are in server farms that are managed on renewable energy, right? So there's
Mm.
some level of investment there.
Okay.
And on the other side, you'll have social enterprises, right? So these are groups that are saying, I might not be able to get market-based returns, right? But I'm going to actually create more social and environmental good through my core operations, right? And so investors might invest with like a just different instrument, like a revenue-based equity buyback, right? Which is as a company makes revenue, a predetermined percent of that revenue will go back to the investors until they purchase back all of the equity that was part of the original investment. Sometimes lower return, right? But you can feel really good about that return because there's no degradation of the environment the companies themselves aren't like fostering issues, say like gender inequality or income inequality as a result. So it's really quite a wide spectrum. And I think the gold standard here, if you will, is like there are some global assessments that really spin out of a group called B Labs or Benefit Corporation, where any business can do this, small, big. If you're the owner or you're not, you can take the assessment, you can see where you stand. And if you get over a certain score on that, they essentially say like, yeah, you would qualify for like the impact investing assets.
Interesting. And that's directly related to certified B corporations, but on the investment side?
Yeah, so they have a rating system that's spun out of that Benefit Corporation assessment that's called their Global Impact Investment Rating System. And it's almost a mirror of it, but it's essentially using that same methodology, right? And then what you would do is, like, let's say you're a small business owner or an entrepreneur or just started a startup, you could take that and it would actually give you kind of a printout of like, hey, here are things that you should do to improve your business. Here's some gaps. But when you go to investors, that can actually qualify you for huge new asset classes, right? Because increasingly investors are moving their money into impact investing vehicles. So having that certification actually opens up new investing doors for you. Now, there's other challenges, right? You have to manage more than just your profit margins now, which is challenging, right? However, it does open up new connections from partnerships, and that's true for investors as well as business partnerships.
Hey guys, I just want to remind you, if you want to find more content like this, you can visit sebastiannaum.com. That's Sebastian, NAUM.com. You can also get a ton of other marketing resources from myself and my agencies, ranging from SEO to social media, influencer marketing, branding, web development, and more. Again, that's sebastiannaum.com. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the show.
So while we're talking about money, ROI is super important. So when we're looking at ROI, do you have like an example of a company that either implemented social good or a purpose into their company that actually increased their ROI, or just simply any example of a company that you saw ROI actually be greater because they are a social enterprise?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'll rattle off a couple of big examples, maybe a small one too, right? So look, I think you can look at Microsoft now. They're making major plays in accessibility, right? And that's for people who have speech impediments, hearing impediments, eyesight impediments, right? They are making huge plays on accessibility, which you would argue is a social good. And you can see them winning huge contracts with governments, right? Canadian government, United States government, and they lead oftentimes with that accessibility play. So you're actually seeing this from there. So they're saying, hey, we're incurring the cost of becoming more responsible. Now, Microsoft, you got to say, hey, look, this is still kind of a very profit-driven company. Give me a different example.
I like that example though. So it's interesting though to see a big company, because most people don't think about it that way. But so you're saying they're using little items here or there, and that's actually helping them gain big contracts.
100%, right? Recruit better employees, right? Retain their top talent, right? Build goodwill with governments, build goodwill with bigger stakeholders. Yep. And then I think you can go mid-tier, right? I feel like Patagonia is probably a little played out, but they're recognizable.
Right.
They literally expose their entire supply chain, and they say this is what's good, this is what's bad, right? And their CEOs, and there's been a couple. I think their third is entering now. Right? They've all stated that when we make investments for the benefit of the environment, our business actually benefits. And for anybody who's kind of newer into this world or curious, there's a great book. It's called "Let My People Go Surfing" by Yvon Chouinard. Really kind of outlines this from the way you source to the way you treat your employees, right? But awesome. I think you also have to look at small companies, right? There's a really cool startup here just just in Seattle called Humanly. It's a AI bot to help recruit and enter employees or future employees into screening processes, right? And a lot of different things that they could do, especially during a crisis, right? And where they decided to double down and invest on was, how do we actually make our hiring process, how do we make our AI bots more equal, right? So it doesn't matter what college you come from, it doesn't matter what the color of your LinkedIn photo is, it doesn't matter what groups or associations you're a part of, you're not going to get screened out for racial issues anymore. And they've made that a core part of their technology. And so as they do that, and as they're selling, well, look what's happening now, right? We're seeing a massive rise for social justice and racial equality. Here you've got a company that was built social positive, right, for equality in processes, right? And they're growing like crazy as a result. So, I think a lot of different levels, but you see these investments time and time again, they pay off. And I think what's hard when you're operating on a bottom line is to say, I might not realize those profits, this month or this quarter, right? But from a long-term play, it's to quote Paul Pullman, the former CEO of Unilever. He says, addressing inequalities and the environment is the biggest business opportunity of all that we have ever experienced. It's a $12 trillion market opportunity on a yearly basis if we can address income inequality and environmental issues. It's massive. Interesting.
Wow. That is massive. Yeah. And it's so important to look at it in a long-term perspective too, because at the end of the day, it's never healthy to look at short-term, and it's not even about just companies and ROI. Anything in your life, usually short-term isn't the right way to go.
That's totally true.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. That's great, man. That's awesome. So you do large scale consulting for these big companies. It's an impact consulting. It's probably something that a lot of people aren't very aware of. But one of those things is that people from multinational corporations, and the corporation sponsors them to go do volunteering programs with you guys. Now, it's not just about the volunteering itself, but you guys are actually teaching them skills about social impact, which is awesome. So what are some of those skills, and are people taking those skills back into these big corporations and actually, creating change because of what they learned?
Yeah, such a good question. So, like I mentioned, this organization like Humanly is an example, right? Okay, so I'm in Seattle. They're based in Seattle. This is a very, very resource-rich area. But around the world, there are really cool startups like this that are figuring out their own local solutions to their own problems, right? And this can be distributed solar energy panels for rural communities, right? This can be distributed education or education systems for slums, right? This can be water sanitation or toilet hygiene issues in different areas. Around the world, you're seeing all these cool social enterprises, locals, people from communities spring up and saying, in my own community, I can solve our own problems using the power of business. I don't have to wait for some like foreign aid or some philanthropist to come by and tell me, that I'm living in poverty and tell me how to fix it, right? People are creating their own solutions and they're employing people in the process of it. And oftentimes what these organizations and these innovators need is access to expertise, right? So maybe they're building a cloud app, or they need to train their team on data science, right? Or they need to improve some of their marketing, and they don't have access to the resources that you might have if you're closer to a major city. And so what we've set out to do is get skills-based volunteers, we call them experteers, to equip these organizations with the skills that they need to scale up and grow. And what's interesting is these organizations are innovating at like the very first and the very last mile of supply chains, right? So in the way that we're maybe harvesting crops, like let's say coffee beans, right? Or in the way that we're distributing this and maybe employing people, at the very end of that distribution chain. These innovators are also solving problems for very big companies, right? And companies are figuring out like, how can I empower them, right? How can I bring more people into the economy? How can I make our supply chains more sustainable? And more resilient, especially during times of crisis. And so we've partnered up with a lot of companies who are saying, yes, I want to volunteer, but I'm doing it really strategically, right? I'm sponsoring people to volunteer to support organizations, right, that are a part of a global value chain in some capacity, right? And so, as an example, with Microsoft, right, Microsoft knows that the world needs more engineers, right? And so they're partnering up with universities, with startups, with innovation hubs, and more across, well, honestly, every continent. But this program specializes on the African continent, right, to help teach employability skills in engineering, right? And so people might be coming out of school with fantastic knowledge of like core fundamental principles, but software engineering in the cloud is so rapid, right? There's like a new framework every 6 months, right? So here you actually have people practicing in the profession who are then able to volunteer with new college grads or with new entrepreneurs that are building on this technology. And so, as an example, in the Microsoft program, they're saying, hey, let's volunteer with these universities, right? Let's support them. Our employees want to do it because they want to see the power of our products in the market and how they exist, not just for profit, but for actually empowering people to do more. So let's sponsor people to do that. And then when people go and they start to see and better understand the world where their product or their business operates, right? They learn a ton in the process, right? So one example is like facial recognition software, right? I know there's a whole bunch of issues around facial recognition software, and personally, for whatever it's worth, I think it needs regulation, right? And and there's a lot that goes into it. But like one example, right, is like one of the stories that was shared with us was a person was on the African continent, right, in Kenya, showing off this facial recognition AI app, and it's super powerful, right? Like if you put it up on me, if we were sitting face to face, you put it up on me, it'd be like 38-year-old white male, and if I was drinking coffee, it would even label it like drinking coffee, like crazy precise. He puts it up on a black person, 27-year-old female. It's like 42-year-old man. And he's like embarrassed, right? He's like, oh crap. It puts it on a guy. It's like another 10 years off on his age. And he's like, oh, our tech is racist. Like and right. And it was built by who, right? Not black people, right? And so he's like, we got to go back and fix this. So he goes back, he fixes it. He says, I'm part of an accessibility team here, or I'm not part of this company. Like puts his job on the line, right? Gets involved, helps the company fix the tech, gets involved on like the sales and evangelism, right? And now he's like one of the biggest advocates of accessibility in software, not just in who can access it, but like in the core algorithms, which quite frankly is like a massive investment that companies need to make to get that right. So and there's tons of examples like this that we have, right? And so I think once people really understand the magnitude of their work product, whatever that is, but like on a human scale, they're inspired to make sure that it's really doing right by the world.
And that came from a volunteer project, essentially.
Volunteer project. Yep.
That's awesome. Yep. That's really cool, man. That's gotta make you proud to see that change. What change that caused? It was such a one little thing caused that big change.
Little bit of insight goes a long way, right?
Absolutely. That's awesome. So how important is having, so there's skills, and then there's also, you guys are empowering people by having them be connected with, important networks of mentors, right? So what's the difference there? How important is the networking and the mentors versus just the skills as well? Can you provide an example where a network connection, so you just provided a great example of skill, where like somebody like, the networked or connected with someone or mentored that, generated impact?
Yeah. Great question. So, so that was the example that I was referencing was with one of our corporate programs. We also operate a program that's called the Moving Worlds Institute, which is essentially a professional development program for individuals, right? Where we say, hey, for anybody that wants to advance their career and create more impact in their career, we are going to put you into a cohort of like-minded professionals in a 6-month fellowship. And in that, we're going to give you a crash course in impact investing and social enterprise and human-centered design, so you can understand the tools and frameworks to really make an impact. Now, as part of that, like, we know that journey is hard, it's lonely, it's scary. Like, one of the, like, I don't know, for anybody listening, right? If you're starting to kind of be like, I want to do more good, you like talk about it to your friends and they're like, what are you, like a bleeding heart? Like what is
Yeah.
like, what do you mean you want to do that? Like, cool, like good for you. I think people even tend to tease like are more like giving friends, right? And so it is a little bit lonely. And I think by being connected into a peer group of people that are going through that, there's a lot of value in that shared experience. But what we've also found is, let's say you have an idea, right? Like, let's say you are coming back into a company or starting your own thing, and you're trying to do something that is more impactful. Like, you need support on that, right? And that's where mentors can really come into play. So, as an example, we had one person. Her name was Heather. She was, on a fast track for a pre-IPO, tracking to IPO. B2B marketing technology company. She herself was a director of marketing, new business to business marketing, but was just like, I need to give back. Like, I need to figure out a way. And she was like, I'm joining the Institute and I want to go join a nonprofit. And we're like, cool, that's awesome. Really glad that you want to use your career for impact. But before you just like quit everything and go join this nonprofit, let's just like test a couple of things out, right? Let's create some assumptions and hypotheses you have about your career. And then let's see where that might go. And one of the best way to test out your assumptions and hypotheses about your career is like, get out of the building, right? Is to go spend time in impact organizations. So she spent time at a small social enterprise that also had a partnership with a big nonprofit. She saw the differences in supporting these two different types of organizations and was like, wow, at least for me in the way I work, being in a big nonprofit, when I'm used to such like rapid iteration, innovation, and scale, would actually be like really hard for me. So she ended up starting her own consultancy to support social enterprises, kind of bring like the best of like modern B2B and digital marketing tactics to the social enterprise and startup sector.
Nice.
And so here you've got someone again who's saying, I've got this wealth of experience like that I've picked up in the corporate sector. It's super important. It can be levered for good in a lot of ways. For her, that way was, let me actually help and make these leading technologies and marketing strategies available to more organizations so that they can scale more effectively.
Great example. Yeah, that's really awesome. So, Mark, Moving Worlds is doing all kinds of things in terms of conscious business, externally to the companies that consult with you, to all kinds of different people in your in the institution, into these different programs that you're doing. What are you guys doing internally, Mark? How are you practicing conscious business internally to all the stakeholders within your company?
Yeah, such a good question. Look, I love that question because I think so often we look at the nonprofit sector and say like, oh, hey, look at this great thing that they do for, this beneficiary group, right? Or these end users, right? And we say that must be a great organization, right? And then if you look at their Glassdoor reviews, and you often see like, that's not the case. Like, it's really hard to work there. People can't build their careers there, right? They're stressed, they're unhappy. Like, in fact, there's a lot of people that work in social work, as an example, that they have to have their own like, psychologists and therapists because it's hard work. And that is super true in, I think, startups in general, but especially in social impact startups. So look, I'm going to be the first to say that we're not perfect, right? But we try, and there's a number of things that we do for that. So very early on, like, we created like an employee guidebook. And I know that sounds kind of lame, right? Oh, cool, you got a guidebook, right? But like, really diligent. Like, do we have equity statements? Do we have things to do in case of somebody who is like, in theory, at a higher level has an issue, right? Is there a direct line to the board or somebody outside the company where employees can go and access if there is an issue? Do we have feedback mechanisms for managers so that we can make sure that input can be A, transparent, and then B, socialized? We're very transparent with our salaries, right? Our employees know what our revenues are. They know what percentage of our revenues is going to salaries. They have a very open view into how salaries are calculated for every person. It's based on literally, we call it our calculator model, so that we know it's equal. So even though we're a small team, we're still able to ensure that everybody feels that they're equal in their salary. As soon as COVID rolled out, we rolled out Friday monthly mentals, or I'm sorry, monthly mentals. So the last Friday of every month, which is a practice that we'll be keeping forward. It's just like, it's a monthly mental, like, do what you need to do.
Nice.
We talk about mental health. We give people leave for mental health or mental breaks. So I think like I mentioned earlier that the B impact assessment, if any company takes that, one of the pillars is how do you treat your employees, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
these issues around like pay transparency, gap between highest paid, lowest paid, statements in terms of like equity, equality, justice, escalation paths, like these are actually covered in there. So even if you're not like officially in charge of a company, you can actually still take that B impact assessment and get insights into things that you should do for your business. So it's a great way to like learn if you're like, oh, I think we should do something. Like even if
Yeah.
I'm a manager, like not even business wide, but even just on my team, it actually gives like really cool examples and insights and ideas of what you can do even at just your kind of own micro level. But yeah, it's
Is
super
that
important.
salary transparency, is that challenging, honestly, sometimes, Mark? Like, you're like, well, we're charging our consultancy fee for this, is $100,000, and like this trickles down to like, me getting 5K out of it or something like that.
Sure.
Just throwing numbers out there, but
Yeah. Look, it is, right. And I think similar to our conversation earlier, it's like it depends on the time frame. Like in the short term, it is, right. But in the long term, it pays off. And I think it pays off tenfold, right. It means that there's more trust in the organization, right. People are going to stay longer within the organization. And so, yeah, like it's weird. Right. And I remember like it was actually our Mariusz, our lead engineer, who kind of came on and was like, hey, I think we should roll out price transparency. And I was like, it's crazy. There's no way. Like I can only imagine what it's going to do. And he's like, just try it. Like ask everybody to do a survey, right? Of just like, what do you think everybody in the company is being made, like is getting paid, right? And he's like, people already know, like we already know that there are pay gaps, right? And I think what's important about it is, okay, maybe it'll expose the next issue, which is like, okay, well, we don't really have transparent performance reviews. So let's build that, but let's do that together, right? And let's do that in a fair and equitable way where more voices can be at the table. So 100%, I think it's super challenging, but the long-term benefit of it is like, easier decisions in the future. What I can also share is like when we've been hiring new people, we just say like, hey, look, here's your offer, first and final. This is what it is, and it's fair in the company. And they go, oh, that's fair for the company? Cool, love it, right?
that's awesome.
And so it just makes everything going forward easier, right? If
Sure.
you have money for a bonus, it's easier to distribute because everybody's already aware, and fairness is kind of built into everything that you do. So
Just out of curiosity, when people made those guesses, were they pretty much on or were they off? Like maybe were they actually totally overestimating what upper management was actually making, or were they pretty much on?
I think we're pretty close. I was overestimated because actually during that time, and Derek, my other co-founder, we were actually we were lower paid on the we to go back further in time. Like this goes back, I don't know, 6 years. But after we raised our impact investment dollars, we actually like kind of ran through that, and we were in a really, really tight spot. And so we committed to suppressing our own salaries until the team was rebuilt, because we decided to raise and keep more equity for employees instead of doing another round. And so yeah, that was I think kind of the biggest rise, is that like kind of the founders, or me as the CEO, was actually getting paid less than
They thought.
almost everybody. I mean, we were a small team at the time, right? But yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, congratulations with everything that you're doing, Mark. You're definitely helping create and inspire conscious leaders, and you're a conscious leader yourself. What do you think are the two most important traits that a conscious leader must embody today?
Ooh, today. Today during COVID is like, you almost have to ask this question like every week to get a new answer. I think there's two things that I found myself leaning on the most during the last like 6 months, right? So I'm going to say today, let's couch this in like a major health, environmental, and economic crisis, is staying principled, right? Like, earlier today, we were talking with one of our big corporate clients, who's newer, right? We're still in pilot stage, right? And they wanted something done one way, and we were standing by our social impact organizations, right? And we were saying, hey, look, I understand that you want this to happen faster, but that's actually not in the best interest of our organizations. And for us to be partners, this is why you chose us. That's really important. And so we can co-design and we can partner together to develop a solution that takes into account all our stakeholders, but we can't just like rush this through. And so I think staying principled during these times is super, super important. And so doing that self-work on what are your personal principles and what are your organizational principles, right? Like earlier I mentioned like price transparency or some of the things that we do for our employees, like that does not come naturally to me. Like that is not where I go in when I think of company building, right? I think of scale, I think of processes, right? I think of innovating on behalf of our end users. But when I look at it from a principle perspective of, do I think that people working deserve to be paid fairly across the company, and themselves be able to like take care of their own mental and physical needs during this time, like 100%, right? So we got to stick to it, even if it's hard. And then I think the second thing is, which I found probably the most challenging during this time, right, is it's this idea of like never let a good crisis go to waste, right? And it's like, I think it's super hard being a leader right now, caring for all these things, right? The social well-being, the mental well-being of your team, the profits, right? The margins, like keeping clients, right? There's so much uncertainty in the market, partners everywhere, and you're just trying to stitch these things all together, right? And especially in smaller organizations, it's so hard to then also say, what's next? What's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, right? And but I think, especially in like the social impact space, thinking of like, how are we going to rebound from this and help create a world that's more equitable and more environmentally responsible, and pushing ourselves to use this time to also build a future that we all want. Like it's hard. It's super hard to even have the mental space to do that and be like, can I even expose myself to more risk during this time? But to me, those are like, it's almost been my weekly mantra, right? Is like, am I able to hold on to what's important to me and our organization from a principled standpoint? And like, am I giving myself some time and space and conversation and like insight gathering to like build for the future so that we can actually use this as an opportunity to grow? And I think that that's going to be the real mark of success for I'll kind of say the social enterprise sector at this time, but I think it expands beyond that.
If I have to sum that up in one word, I would have to say it's resilience.
There you go.
or a combination of resilience and innovation, or resilience and creativity meet in order to make it through. So
and a lot of coffee.
A lot of coffee. That I've been on that one too. That's great, Mark. Well, Mark, where can people find Moving Worlds or yourself? Where can they follow you, find you?
Yep. Check us out, movingworlds.org. If you want to connect with us on Twitter or Instagram, our handle is experteering. And then if you want to find me, Twitter, LinkedIn, at Mark Horoszowski, but good luck spelling that. So my guess is you have to look down in the cliff notes.
Exactly. All the links will all be there. Well, thank you so much for being on, Mark. You're definitely a conscious leader. And so just keep doing you, and best of luck with everything. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks, Sebastian. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed that episode. You know, it takes a lot to put these things together, but I truly love doing it. If you enjoyed this episode or the show in general, and you listen to it on audio podcast, please take some time to give it a review. It would really mean a lot to me. And if you watch the video, please go ahead and just click subscribe and share it with somebody that you think would like it. It would really mean the world to me, and it helps keep the show alive. Visit sebastiannaum.com for more content, and follow me on Instagram at sebnaum. That's SEBNAUM. Thanks again for spending your time with me. I know it is valuable. I hope you have a great rest of the day and week. Till next time.